And we're live. Welcome to the Survivor Global Show. I'm your host, Chris Swanepoel, as ever. And today I've got a very special guest with me. We've got Eager Turtle, also known as Doug in his real life. Turtle has got his own YouTube channel and has actually accumulated quite a bit of a following there for those that aren't aware. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong here, Doug, this is your first time on a podcast, right?
I'm a podcast virgin.
That's right. Well, we're breaking it today, and there's no better way to do it than actually talking to you about Australian Survivor, which I'm really excited about because I think most of your content up to this point has been on US Survivor. Have you actually done anything on Australian Survivor on your channel?
I've done a couple of videos, but most of the audience is American people, so I figure they like American Survivor. Plus, if you read comments every time you do something about Australian Survivor, you have people being like, "What is this show? Don't do this."
That's fair enough. Hey, and if it's not broken, don't fix it, I guess. But I'm hoping you're really excited to talk about Survivor in Australia, which is your own country. And I'm really excited to have an Australian or just Australian on the show. So really excited to get into it. So Doug, what have you thought of the season so far? What's your general consensus?
My general consensus is this story is really good, but you have to look past the edit a lot of the time, because a lot of the edit focuses on like 10 people, which is a bit frustrating because I want to hear everybody's story.
Yeah.
But the people who do get focused on are the end game players. So you get to really focus on them and what they're doing, which is kind of nice in a way, but also a bit annoying.
No, I definitely hear you, and I think that that's something that we've been finding. Like as we talk to people on the US Survivor show, there's definitely some issues around editing a lot of the time where they only focus on specific players, and because it's so twist heavy these days, I feel like sometimes with the US you even get less players that they get some screen time. But I'm sure we'll go into it because in the second episode, someone gets ousted from the game that probably didn't get any screen time, which was a very big surprise to me, especially since this person has got previous experience being in a reality show. I would have thought they would be pretty good on the show, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. So in the beginning of episode 6, we have this great scene with Ross and the fishing spear running after a bird, and he's trying to catch it, which is really funny, and people laugh about it. And Luke said, you know, Ross is a bit of a loose cannon, and this coming from a loose cannon. So it gives you a little bit of an idea, because throughout the whole season up to this point, Ross is being painted as this loose cannon, someone that can be a wild card at any stage, and no one really knows if he's going to stick with the alliance or not. That's kind of what the edit would like you to believe at this point. Janine does mention, though, that she is sitting in a really good place with her alliance, and she's starting to get closer to Abby and also Pia on her side, and they're in a very tight 3-girl alliance within that 6 alliance that they've got. Now, when we look at this from your end, Doug, how do you see the dynamic in this tribe sort of shaping up at this point? With the 3 girls being very close, you've got Ross as a bit of a wild card, and we know that Dave and obviously Lukey, they're pretty close as well.
It definitely seems like the women have the upper hand, because we don't really see Dave and Luke and Ross like talking as a group of 3. So if it came down to those numbers, it seems like the women would be able to control the vote. And I don't think it seems to be realized by Dave and Luke that that's the situation. They seem to be playing into their hands, not really thinking about how it will happen down the road.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think that it's a massive blind spot for David and Luke. And I think that especially when you look at David throughout this whole episode, he is so confident in his own ability, because he talks about the fact that he's got an idol. You know, he tricked Sean, and he's got a real idol. He can't believe that he pulled it off, and that he knows where the other idol is, which his boy Luke has got the other idol. So he feels really confident at this stage in the game, right? And I think because of that confidence, he's blinded to the fact that the girls are starting to sort of disenfranchise with him a little bit. They didn't like how he treated Stephen and Et and Simon in the previous vote as well. So that sort of carries over into this game as well. One of the other things we see here in the early game is Et talking about the fact that Steve's gone now, so that means him and Simon's at the bottom, and he talks about the fact that there's a big likelihood that one of them are going to be next on the chopping block here, and the only thing that they really bring to the table is strength at this point. And he tries to connect with Luke and also Ross at this point. So clearly, Et thinks that those are the two people that he can connect closest with. Doug, are you a rugby league fan at all, or not really?
Kind of, but I'm also younger, I guess. I wasn't really around when he was doing his thing.
That's fair. Was it do you know if when this showed in the Australian sort of TV over there, was there a big hype about the fact that we had someone like ET on the show, or would you say the hype was more around maybe like your Simons and your Abby because they were closer to actually playing probably when you watched some of those? I don't know if you watch AFL. Rugby league, I've got a little bit of knowledge on. AFL, I've got no knowledge on at all.
He actually does this like fishing show as well, which
Yeah.
airs every week here. So I'm pretty sure people who are younger probably know him more from that than his actual footy.
Yeah.
So people know of him, but they're not like starstruck or anything. But that's like, hey, it's that guy from that fishing show.
Yeah, and it does come up a bit later on where they said that he only caught one fish, but I mean it's a little bit ridiculous to try and expect someone to catch a lot of fish out there. You don't have the same equipment as you would have on the fishing show, I'm sure. Even though I remember in one of the first episodes they showed Luke get out there and get a fish as well on the same day with that minimal gear, which I found pretty interesting. And I think I've seen since the show Luke and Et, there's been some photos on Instagram with them going out and catching fish together. So clearly they've stayed mates after the show as well, which is great to see. Now, we do get a little bit of an insight here on the Contenders Tribe as well in the early stages. And I found it pretty funny seeing John and Andy play a bit of backyard cricket, like we call it over here in Australia and New Zealand. And they're just having fun. And I love seeing these human moments in Survivor Australia, which we don't get a lot of in the US version. What do you think of these moments that we get that's pretty funny? Is it pretty much the Australian way to have these fun moments and put your feet up and relax and joke around sometimes?
I think we kind of more laid back and just like hang out and kind of just shoot the shit and do what we want. A lot more than you would see like, on American TV as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it does happen in American Survivor as well, but we don't see it, which I guess is the benefit of having longer episodes. Is we see these kind of dumb moments.
Yeah, I was going to say we don't see it unless it's Tony Vlachos creating a ladder to go and get some breadfruit or something like that. But there's some moments, but I do agree with you. We don't see enough of it. And it's definitely one of the things that I really enjoy about Australian Survivors, seeing these human moments, these fun interactions. Now, we also at this stage learn a little bit about Sean being extremely comfortable with his alliance. He's getting closer to Daisy and also John in his alliance. He's got an idol in his pocket. He feels extremely confident about where he is in the game because he's also now got an idol in his pocket. But he does drop the very specific thing out there that I actually noted. He says that I've got the idol in my possession, but I haven't actually gone and looked at it yet.
That's
what do you think of it?
Survivor 101. You should probably look at your idol before you go around saying you have it. Actually make sure it's legit.
I couldn't help but laugh at it, yeah.
I don't think he's like a big fan of a show because anyone who actually watches would probably realize, you'd probably check.
Great guy, right? But not the best Survivor player potentially. And I think probably he's too trusting here of David as well. So definitely, I agree with you. The first thing you do when you get an idol or you were given an idol is go check the validity of it, because we do find out later on when him and David actually get to talk that at that point he still hasn't looked at it, or he still isn't aware of the fact that he's got a fake idol in his possession, which is a great bonus for David, obviously, at that stage. Now, moving on to the reward challenge here, I noted that the contenders have not eaten food for basically about 2 weeks now because they keep losing all of the reward challenges, but they do win the immunity challenges. So it's been pretty funny. Any thoughts in regards to being on the island, having to compete, and you haven't had any of these food rewards? Like, what do you think about the state of the camp and what we are seeing at this point on the contenders side?
I guess it's because the rewards are usually more physical and like just an individual person like pulling something. And so if you're not eating, obviously that'll be a hard time for you. But
Yeah.
if you're like doing the more team challenges where it seems like immunity most of the time is, you can kind of get past the fact that you're not eating a bit better. And it seems like it's a bit like heroes versus villains, the American season, where the hero is like individually all very strong, but they can't put their egos to the side to work together. So they kind of like get in each other's way and they can't do the challenge properly, and then the underdogs keep on winning immunity.
It's very true, and it's interesting because the dynamic is quite different here. You bring up a valid point with the basically the challenges up to this point for all of the immunity challenges have been some sort of a puzzle, some sort of a circus trick at the end that they need to do to complete it. But the individual challenges have been more in the reward challenge space, where it's been individuals stacking up against each other, where maybe you get found out a little bit more. And I think it's really important noting that they haven't eaten for 2 weeks, because going into this specific challenge, it's a tug of war challenge that they have to do against each other, and it shows you that it's brute strength. And there is one point where when they lose the first part, the contenders lose the first part of it, the champions note that, listen, they're feeling pretty weak at the moment, and we're getting through them pretty closely. But I did think that throughout this whole challenge and throughout both of these episodes, the music was beautiful and so intense at these points when the two tribes were going at it. It really gets you in the mood for it, right?
The Australian Survivor music is like very loud but very iconic.
Yeah.
No matter what the situation, there's like intense music going on. It's great.
Yeah, like, I mean, it makes you feel.
Pardon?
Sorry, you go ahead.
So if anybody hasn't watched it, they should, because I feel like it kind of makes you feel really like passionate about it, and you kind of feel on the edge of your seat, even if the challenge has been going for like half an hour.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. It's great to see, and it really gets you in the mood for it. And I mean, it was a back and forth in this challenge as well, specifically around when the men were out there, where it looked like, when they had the four men on both sides, it looked like the four contenders were easily going to win it. But then every time it looked like maybe the champions are going to pull it back, but they do end up losing their battle. But it sets up a great finale between Sean, who's seen at this point in the game as the person, like the Joey Amazing of the season, I should say, the person that everybody wants to take down and can do no wrong. And he goes up against Wild Child Ross, who puts his name up here in a spot where I feel like sometimes people are afraid to put their name up in this spot because, if you don't get it, you end up letting your tribe down.
Yeah.
Yep. You agree with that?
A lot of people would not be wanting to put themselves in that situation, which is fair enough.
Yeah, but Ross does pull it out in this case, right? So he does an amazing job at actually beating Sean against all odds, and I didn't expect for him to pull it off. I actually forgot what happened, to be honest, because this is my second time watching it as well. But I kind of forgot who won that one. And
by Ross, if something happened to Sean, like did he fall over or did he like slip, or it didn't seem to be clear what actually went wrong.
Yeah, I feel like when I looked at it, it kind of looked like he lost his footing and he kind of slipped. But I do think that credit has to go to Ross as well, because when I used to be back in school, I actually used to do tug of war as a sport, and so I kind of actually know a little bit about it. Like, I wasn't brilliant at it or anything like that. It wasn't my sport that I achieved the most in, but I do know that a tug of war, it is all about your body position. So when you see people standing upright, like I saw Harry standing upright trying to do it, that's the complete wrong body position. You want to kind of lean with your body back into it, like Ross did, and Ross locked his legs pretty well into the ground, leaning back. And he's a heavy guy. Clearly, he's not the lightest guy, and he put his body weight into it. So what he did at that point was he was actually locking in and getting Sean to use all of his energy to pull. And when you do that, it is all about just when that person, you feel the slightest weakness on the rope and the tension kind of a little bit of it drops away. That's when you do the push to get someone off their balance. So I would like to believe that Ross, his technique was flawless. I don't know, but we definitely see Sean slipping. But I think the credit should go to Ross for winning that challenge regardless, because definitely it wasn't the easiest of challenge to go up against Sean and beat him, because clearly the guy is taller and bigger and stronger than most of the men out there. And I think it's a brilliant win for him and his tribe. Now, we do see from this point, right, we see that they get to choose someone to come over and enjoy the reward with them. What did you think of their choice here?
I think it was a pretty easy choice of Baden, I guess, because like he looks like he's maybe going to die soon. That was a fair enough choice, I think. I think, was it Sean was the other choice? He was more questionable. I didn't understand that exactly.
Yeah, so let's think it through, right? So definitely agree with you. Baden is the good choice, because they were like, listen, we feel bad for this guy. We can see his ribs sticking out, kind of like the Cochrane back in the day, where this is Cochrane, you could see his heartbeat when he went into one of the challenges because he just got that skinny. So so obviously they chose him, and also he probably comes across as one of the least threatening people. So if we give him some food, he's not going to kill us in the next challenge. But then Baden gets given the choice of who to select next, not the Champions Tribe. So when you think about it that way, do you think Baden made a good decision?
It's hard to tell like who he is strategically interested in working with, because maybe he's wanting to work more with Sean and Daisy versus like Andy and Harry. If that's the case, then that choice makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if you think about it, with the way that it played out, he did win some good faith with his actual tribe, because they go back after the challenge to say Baden made the right choice. He chose the strongest person in our tribe to actually get the food, which means that he's going to be stronger going into the next immunity challenge, which we're going to need him. And from that sense, I think he made a really good choice. And clearly, Baden, and it is hard because we don't get to see him talk a lot about his perspective and his position in the game at this stage. But clearly, he would have felt like Sean is like one of the leaders in the tribe. And it's been mentioned before in some of the previous episodes by Harry that the tribe is being run by Sean, Daisy, John, and I believe Matt was also thrown in there, even though Sean hasn't mentioned Matt in that tight group with him. So I think that it's not a bad choice, but this does set up a great dynamic with the actual reward challenge, the reward itself, where they get to make some burgers. And I thought this was the most tasty looking sort of reward so far. I'm a big meat lover myself, and being from South Africa originally, we love what we call a braai, which is a barbecue. So I saw that and I was like, I would have been in my element, almost like John with his parma that he was after. so seeing them eat that was a great reward to see. But in this time, we see David kind of avoiding talking to Sean directly, and he realizes that, listen, it might not have worked out that great for Sean to come over, because firstly, we're feeding him and he's going to potentially take that strength into the next challenge. But secondly, I've just given this guy a fake idol, and he might know about it and blow up my game here. But what he does, very interesting here, right, is that he has a conversation with Sean eventually, and he says that from his side, he's already played the idol on Pia, and they needed to play the idol to save her. What did you think of that as a strategic move, I should say?
I think doesn't really make sense to potentially put more holes in your story than necessary. Like, there was not really any advantage to do that, and a lot of like cons. It could easily be found out. It wasn't
Yeah.
really any point to it, I didn't think. But
Yeah, and I think what he tried to do, like I'm going to jump into David's thinking because the first time I saw it, I remember thinking to myself, it's not a bad thing to try and cover up your tracks, right? So that this person
yeah,
doesn't know you still have an idol on you because you never know when they may use that information against you. And now it sounds like the idol is gone. But what he didn't think through is that he hasn't actually even told everyone in his current alliance that he's got an idol in his possession. And the only other person that knows this is Janine at this stage, right? So at the end of the day, if that gets blown up by Sean or someone in the other tribe, like we do, and we will see this a little bit later on, and we'll talk about that. He's really blowing his game up in a big way, where he's starting to look very sneaky. And I had this conversation with Rob Bentele from Survivor South Africa the other day, and he mentioned to me that social capital is so important, and it's something that I've always believed in as well. And any move that you make that's unnecessary, that is seen as sneaky or going against your alliance, that burns into your social capital, which means that in this case, he's burning some of that social capital, and he's already got some people firmly looking at him in regards to what he's doing in the game. So I think that it was a little bit of a risky move. And I didn't think that he needed to play it at that stage. To sit back and sort of play it out may have been the better move in that case. Now, one thing that does get noticed at this stage as well, as we mentioned, Abby, Pierre, and Janine, they're quite close together, and they're noticing that, especially Abby is noticing that David is talking to Sean a lot, which is putting an even bigger target on him because she thinks that he's doing it to further his game later on, building that future alliances. She's got no idea why that conversation is happening because she doesn't know he's got an idol. So again, a really big, I would say, negative point for his game at this stage. Now we do move to the Contenders Tribe, right? And with the Contenders, they've got Daisy and Harry there. They believe that Baden's made the right move, which we've said. So they're very happy with Baden's choice. Daisy also mentions that hopefully we get some great information from the Champions Tribe coming back with having Baden and Sean on that side, which is great to see because previously we had John from the Contenders Tribe go over for a reward, and I don't think he got any information because I don't think his head was in the game like that to try and bring information back. But clearly with Sean and Baden, some information did get back because it's going to play off in the next immunity challenge. Is there anything around this part before we go into the immunity challenge that you feel like I've missed around the reward that stood out for you or some of the strategy that goes on here? But I think those are the main sort of points that people were sort of the strategizing that were happening and the main game moves that were happening in any case.
Yeah, I just think with Dave, it's a good example of him going like 0 to 100 of like he didn't really talk to Sean to start off with. And then once he decides it's okay, he like almost won't leave Sean away alone. And the rest of the people notice that like Dave's being very talkative. So I think that's just part of Dave's issue is that he kind of doesn't realize to take kind of a more moderate approach to things. He kind of jumps all in, which comes back to haunt him a lot.
Yes, and again, I think that I had this conversation with Candace in the previous podcast, and I said to her, David's that kind of player. If you put him a million times out there, he's going to either go early or he's going to go far because he's the kind of player that tries to hit the home run every single time. You know, it's just in his nature and in his blood to play that way. And it makes for exciting TV. It doesn't necessarily make for the best Survivor player. And I'm all about exciting TV, to be honest with you. That comes first, and then amazing Survivor players is amazing as well. If you can have both, and if you get lightning in a bottle with both of those clicking, then that's just the magic recipe, and you get a Tony Vlachos type of character, which, you know, I love to see playing the game. Now, we go into the immunity challenge, and with this one here, again, I noted epic music. Jonathan's got the guys there. He says, "Listen, the contenders keep winning these immunity challenges. They lose the reward challenges. Matt, how do you feel about it?" And Matt has the saying, and he says it's kind of biblical if you think about it, because these guys get to go and do their last supper every day before they lose someone the next day, and he does it in pure Matt fashion. The good banter before the show, and we see this throughout the show. Is this a very common thing in Australia where banter happens on the sports field?
Yeah, I think people just like to pick fights. It's a fun thing to do. Gets people more excited for challenges. Although I think with Matt, it's interesting because like we don't see him at camp really doing anything. We just see him yelling a lot in challenges. And so I think that there's something missing with him that we're not seeing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that with Matt, I feel like he at this stage has done more than what we're seeing, but he is clearly being used as the poster child for the contenders in these challenges. He's always the one stepping up to sort of have that banter out there. He's got the competition going on with Lukey specifically, where he's trying to take him on in one-on-ones and things like that. But in the previous episode, there was some really cool stuff that we spoke about where he tried to go and encourage, I believe it was Sarah and his team, the one that was in the tsunami, and it showed a softer side to him that clearly is there as well. And I love to see it. I love the banter. I love the fighting talk. I like trying to get psychologically into people's heads, especially on the sports field. I don't know if it will translate that well in Survivor, where you need these people to vote for you later on in the game if you get into the final. I don't know if that's a winning strategy. And it depends on how you do it. Like, I think Luke could get away with it because he would do it in a cheeky way. But I don't feel like Matt's getting away with it that easily at this stage. Personally, it's my opinion around that. But the challenge, the immunity challenge, is an interesting one, and I do want to move on to this. The big thing that that got me on the immunity challenge and that sort of stood out compared to the rest of it was the fact that you had both Baden and Casey on the platform itself. You had these guys with the ropes trying to keep them up, and Casey, she didn't want to do the previous challenge, the high challenge where they had to jump into the water, because we couldn't understand why. Me and Chantel were talking about it, and we said, surely the person that's got the tsunami thing that's happened to them, they get precedence on not doing it. But clearly here you see Casey has got some fear of heights, and I found it really funny that she couldn't look in front of her. She couldn't look to the side. She's trying to have conversation, but she's so uncomfortable during this time up there. But a very key thing happens here when she talks to the other tribe and mentions, Pia, did Dave play the idol for you in the previous, tribal? And Pia comes out and the beans are spilled at this stage, right?
Yeah, but we didn't see Sean tell any of the tribe, so that was a bit strange. Seemed like that scene would have been good to watch because it kind of came out of nowhere when suddenly Casey's being like, what happened to the idol?
I agree, and I mean, and again, it makes you wonder. Like, did Sean tell everyone in the tribe about this? Like, what exactly happened here? How did he deliver that news? I would have loved to have seen it, because sometimes we focus on the challenge for too long, or we focus on a tribal. A lot of the tribals for me in Australian Survivor, sometimes you already know what's going to happen by the time they get to the to the tribals in Australian Survivor. So it feels like a dress rehearsal for everything that we've seen, or the actual play to everything that we've seen take place previously before they go to the tribal. So I would have loved for the tribal to be a little bit shorter so we could see this specific conversation happening to understand it. But I think from a strategic point of view, it kind of shows the flaws in Dave's thinking in regards to telling Sean this, because it's clearly going to come back to haunt him, because now they know that something else is going on, because Pia wasn't aware that David had an idol at this stage. Or maybe, I don't know if Janine told her, but I don't think she was aware of it. And she's definitely not covering for David while Simon is up there as well, because Simon definitely wouldn't know that he's got an idol in his possession. So that was quite funny. Now, we do see that at the end here, the contenders pull away another immunity win, obviously, and that trend continues with the contenders winning the immunities. And this puts ET firmly on the chopping block here. Now, what is it that ET could have done at this point, being in that minority position of two people, in your mind, to ingratiate himself with the majority alliance and actually have a chance at staying?
I would have liked to see ET and Simon throw each other under the bus. I think they both kind of agreed to look out for each other. even though one of them knew they were going home. So if they were more strategic thinkers, they probably would have just been like, "No, screw you," and get everyone out. Especially with Simon, because it doesn't seem like it's clear what he's doing.
Yeah, it's a good point about Simon because I felt like even when he was asked in the tribal, like, what's the pros to keeping you, he didn't really sell me on it, to be honest. The line that he used is very blasé and didn't really capture me. I felt like E.T. fought a lot more to actually be there. And in any case, that's what the editor is showing us at this stage in the game. But, E.T.'s whole strategy is the same one that he's been using since day one here. I'm an athlete, I'm strong, I'll help you with strength. He does try in the actual tribal to say, listen, I'll also be loyal number for you moving forward. I'm not going to turn against you guys and stuff like that. But I feel like it's a little bit late. The main thing that he's doing throughout this whole thing is saying, I'm here, I'm a strength and the numbers. The show does try and throw us off a little bit here for a while, and they show Abby and the girls talking about David as a potential option, and they're onto him. They know he's playing sneaky and things like that. Why do you think that they chose not to go in that direction by the end of this episode? The girls, that is.
Probably also from their perspective, they would have thought there's likely a swap coming on the horizon. So why completely shatter any illusion of trust within our tribe right before anything happens? And I guess from their perspective, they know Dave might have an idol, and Luke might have an idol or something as well, because he's been known to find idols in the past. So I guess they just thought, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, and just keep with them for a little bit.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point.
Yeah.
You make a really good point because if you think about it at this stage, they're 6 strong. So they vote one person out. That means only one person out of that 7 is not happy with them. So anywhere they go in a swap, at least they've still got a majority of people there. And I also think it brings the question as to why did they choose to keep Simon above E.T.? And for me personally, looking at it is that Simon just looked like someone that was going to go with the flow a lot easier. He was going to be happy to still be loyal to them, even if they kept voting against him the whole game. E.T. said he would be loyal, but E.T. seems like someone that's a little bit more savvy than Simon at this stage, according to the edit, because he's noticing the fact that David's running the game. He's mentioning David's probably got to plan a couple of moves in advance. So he seems, and he also was the person in the previous vote that mentioned that, if they're splitting the vote between Stephen and someone else like him, that they could actually go and do something separate to actually get the vote the way they want to go. They just need Ross to flip over. So E.T. is actually shown to have a little bit of a strategic game. I would have loved to see more of him.
Yeah, it constantly felt like we saw a bit of E.T. maybe figuring things out, but we never saw enough of it, and he kind of just left without anything happening, which was a bit of a bummer.
No, I agree 100%. I would have loved to have seen it. So at the end, we do see E.T. voted out in this first episode. And like I said, I think we pretty much discussed that there's not much he could have done. I think his biggest mistake in the game was the fact that he was too slow. He had a day one alliance. We all know that day one alliances don't always work in the long term. And I think Janine brings it up that, when you've got an alliance based on trust because you only formed a couple of days in, like they were probably day 5 or something like that, where they decided, listen, we're at the bottom here, we need to group together or we're all going to get killed one by one and sent home. There's a lot more trust and you get a lot more of a solidified alliance compared to having that day one alliance.
Yeah, although I did think it was a bit silly, her speech, because their alliance was also a day one alliance in reaction to the sports alliance. So they were both day one alliances based off not much. But I guess...
I think so I think when you look at it, you mentioned it's a day one alliance. It's a day one alliance for Pia, Luke, Janine, and who am I missing? Dave. So there's four of
Yeah.
them that are day one alliance, right? But Ross and Abby, they weren't a day one alliance, right? I think they were only pulled in a little bit later because they did lose Annalise, I believe it was Anastasia. Sorry, they did lose Anastasia first in that first alliance. And in fact, one of the things that myself and Adam credited PR with was the fact that even though this minority alliance voted against her in that first vote, she still went back to them to actually join up with them, because a lot of people would have made the mistake and said, hey, I'm going to burn these people, I'm not going to be with them, I'm going to jump over to the Sporty Alliance. But she was smart enough to stick there, because Pia would not have been respected in the Sporty Alliance. She is constantly seen as the weakest person in her tribe. So I think she read that situation really well, and you've got to give credit for the fact that she went back to those, even though it was the minority at that stage, to the minority alliance, and she's now in a much better position for it.
Yeah. I think that's the difference between a player who thinks things through strategically and doesn't base it off their emotions. Because if you saw how Steve reacted about being voted for, he wasn't thinking what's good for my game. He was just angry that people turned against him.
Yeah,
So that's
100%
why
agree
he
with
went
you.
out early.
Yeah, he didn't have the social skills, or the finesse required to play this game. I think he's a really great person probably in life, and super dedicated, and a go-getter for what he wants in life. But sometimes in Survivor, you've got to be able to finesse people over. And the biggest flaw to Steven's game was the fact that he didn't talk to Abby until day 6 or something like that. That was just crazy, and she was in his alliance. But moving on to the next episode, we do get in the champs tribe this really funny moment in the early morning hours with everybody being awoken by an animal being in camp, and you see them scurrying around trying to figure out what it is. Doug, this is my worst fear if I ever were to play Survivor. Middle of the night and there's a snake in there somewhere, I would absolutely die. I hate snakes.
I think that's why I would never go on the show, because I would enjoy the social game and strategy. But as soon as it becomes nighttime and like a weird bug crawls on me, I'll be like, I'm out.
It's funny. It's a funny scene, and it's so much easier to sit on the side, right, and pretend like we would have done so great and get to the final every single time, when we've got the hindsight and being able to see the edit of what everybody's doing, and you're not part of the fishbowl inside of it, and you can't see what other people are doing. I'd still love to play the game. I probably would still, if I ever had the opportunity, I'd go and do it. But that's my worst fear, is like a snake, especially being from South Africa as well. Like, and I know Australia is full of snakes as well. I remember camping with my dad. The last thing you used to do is you would make sure there's nothing in your sleeping bag, and you would make sure before you go to bed that a snake didn't get in there, because they love getting into those sleeping bags when you're camping. So absolutely hated it. And in that case, at least you're in a tent, but you're not in a tent when you're camping out on Survivor. You're sleeping on bamboo in the middle of nowhere. But I've thought, brilliant scene, really funny way to start the episode. We do go to the contenders, and Sean mentions that it's day 15. He feels great. We see that again, that he's got sorry, he's got an idol, and he's got good relationships in this tribe with John and Daisy. He doesn't trust Harry and Andy, and he does see through Harry and Andy, and he notices that they both are playing pretty complicated and smart games at this stage. He does, though, take Andy aside, and he tells Andy that he's got an idol to try and mend the bridge, or try and get those relationships going. And a lot of players in Survivor, they choose to use the idol as a piece of bargaining power when they make alliances. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it might be something you would do as a last resort if you don't have many options. But at the point of a game we're at, I don't see why it made sense for Sean to do that. He wasn't in danger. He's also not reading Andy very well, because Andy isn't somebody who's going to stand by and not do anything about it. He's been shown to kind of be keen to make big moves. They probably don't tell that person, I have an idol.
No, but again, this shows maybe Andy was really good at this stage at hiding that still from Sean, and he was pretending from the start that he's just this guy that's not a fan of the show, and he's a golfer or he writes a blog for golfing and all this kind of nonsense that he came up with as a cover story. But he's pretending like he's not playing at that level. But behind the scenes, we do get the confessional with Andy saying that it's the worst mistake you could have made. My opinion, I'm of the camp that if you've got an idol, unless you're at the bottom and you're trying to throw a Hail Mary and you've got like no other options, maybe try and bargain with an idol. But in my opinion, you should never tell anybody in Survivor that you've got an idol, especially with nullifiers now being thrown around as well. Like, that's the worst thing you could do, is tell someone that you've got an idol. In my opinion, I wouldn't want to do it. And it is interesting that, again, in this season, there's a lot of people that know about each other's idols, and I thought it was a bit of a mistake here from Sean. Interesting thing happens in the next scene, though. They think that they're going to a reward challenge, but they end up going to a tribe swap. And the tribe swap happens in such a way where you've got two former champions, and I believe it was 7 former contenders in the new champions tribe, and you've got 4 old contenders and 5 old champions on the new contenders tribe. So clearly, when you look at this swap, Luke and David are screwed, right?
You'd think so. But then they have
Conventional wisdom.
I think when I watched this the first time, I kind of forgot for like half an hour on the episode that they had 2 idols. So that was like, oh no, Dave and Luke are screwed. And then I realized, oh wait, unless they do something really wrong, they should be fine.
It is tough because you still have to think about when is the right time to play those idols, and you don't want to waste it, which becomes a bit of a conversation later on in the episode, obviously. But I just remember watching it, and my heart rate was at an all-time high the whole time seeing Luke play, because I loved Luke's play in the first season that he played. I was a really big fan of just the childlike energy that he brings to the show, and he reminded me somewhat of a Tony Vlachos type of player who has always been my favorite player. I know people will say, "Oh, Chris, you're just following the bandwagon now." No, Kagion was my favorite season, and even when he lost Game Changers, I was still a big fan of Tony. So Luke for me is almost that. He's not at that level, but he's that kind of player, and he plays with a lot of enthusiasm and brings really good. He's just a good confessional giver and just a good bloke in general. So I felt so bad seeing him in this position the first time when I watched it. Luckily, this time I knew how this episode was going to play out, so it definitely helped a little bit seeing him in this position, but it's not a great position to be in. And dare I say, it's maybe one of the toughest positions to get out of, because if you compare, you mentioned heroes versus villains earlier, when Russell and Parvati and Danielle were at the bottom, that was probably the other time where you see someone like in a 3-person alliance take out a bigger alliance, but it does not happen, especially this early on in the game, very often, so I was really nervous for them here. The other people here that also get a little bit swap screwed are Harry on the other side. He ends up in a minority alliance with a bunch of players there that we haven't really seen much of on the TV show. They haven't really shown us much of an edit, which gives you a little bit of a worry. But this is now going to be Harry's true test to see how he's going to land on his feet, landing on this. And Harry's got the strategy of making sure that he gets closer to the females on the tribe. They're all older. They've all got kids. And he does the dead grandma lie, but this time it's not a dead grandma. It's an unborn baby lie that he makes. And he says that he's got a kid, right? And the woman just falls for this hook, like, and sinker. Do you think this was a great strategy by Harry?
I feel like being more genuine and being yourself, you'll create better bonds than, like, if you say you have a kid, surely, like, after talking to them for a couple of hours and knowing nothing about kids, it'd be pretty obvious that you haven't raised a kid before. It just seems to not be very long, like a very short-sighted move.
Yeah, it's the single guys era, right? Like, we single guys, we think, what's it like to raise a kid? Must be easy, Well, I can tell you, I flattered with one of my best mates for a while when he had his young unborn 1-year-old, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not an easy job to do, and I flattered with him and his partner for like a year, and I still don't know anything about kids, So I wouldn't be able to make that lie and get away with it. And I agree with you. Rather make it something. Surely you've got like a little nephew or a niece, or find something else in common with them that you can talk about. There's a million different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but I do think that it made for a great TV moment, though, and it's great to see these things in the show. But you do fear for how this is going to turn out for him long term, like you've mentioned, and if he can actually keep up the lie, because I'm sure they're going to continue to be very interested in his child and would want to know about him. And I feel like parents lean on each other as like a support system in the game when they play this game, because they're so far away from their kids as well. So I feel like he'll get in trouble there. But we do go to the Champions Tribe. And Daisy thinks that the Champions Tribe is paradise compared to the Contenders Tribe. They've got a better shelter. The fruit trees are a lot closer to the shelter. She even mentions that the sand on the beach is softer. Do we think that production on purpose gave the Champions a little bit more of a pampered life here?
Potentially, but kind of seems a bit unfair that one tribe will be given a way better camp than the other. This seems a bit strange, but I guess kind of plays into the story of like the champion is just to start off well when they're kind of given things, and their contenders have to fight from the bottom. So it kind of works.
I see that. I mean, if we look at Survivor Fiji, the original one, that was a pretty unfair season when you look at the different tribe situations. But if you specifically look at Australian Survivor and the champions, maybe the champions, they were thinking, oh, listen, these are people that are they're celebrities within Australia. We need to make sure that they have got between the two beaches a little bit of the better beach to be on. But it doesn't sound like it's just the beach itself that's the issue here. It does also sound like when you go to the Contenders Tribe, Janine notices that they've got the palms the wrong way around on the roof, and they're going to get wet. So clearly they didn't know what they were doing building the shelter. I do wonder because I don't remember who the main person was who built the shelter for the champions. And I wonder if Luke's experience of having played the game came in handy, or if there was someone else on that tribe that kind of knew a little bit better what they're doing to get that shelter situation to a way where it's a little bit better on that side.
Maybe the champions have some more older, wise people, and the contenders don't know what they're doing. Maybe that played into it a bit. A bit like millennials versus Gen X, where the millennials kind of just aren't really sure what to do and go hang out on the beach instead.
Yeah, it's kind of like our generation. If we get out there, we'd be like, let me get my iPhone out and Google how to build a shelter. Wait, I don't have an iPhone. I can't build the shelter because I can't go on Google or YouTube to have a look at how to do it. Because if you look at the older generation in general, they just seem to be a lot more knowledgeable when it came to hands-on things. I even think about my dad. He used to work in the corporate industry for such a long time, but he could work as a mechanic on his own car. He could do the electrical work in the house before it became illegal in South Africa and you had to be certified. He could do the plumbing, he could do the carpentry. I can't do half of the things that he can do. And probably with the older generation, they had a lot more. This was a hobby for them and what kept them busy. Where for us as a younger generation, when we get home, we'd rather go play some games, or we'd want to watch something online or something like that. So it's we don't spend our time doing these type of things and learning these skills unless we have to. And if we do have to, then we've got the internet there to tell us how to do it. So if you give me the internet, I can probably work out what to do. But out on the island, you don't have that.
So what you're saying is the internet should be available in Survivor?
Hey, I don't know if it should be there, but let's not go down that road. It'll be a completely different show. And in fact, they don't even give you the internet when you do Big Brother, right? So I don't think you need to have the internet out on the island. But what I'm saying is that that's maybe where the difference is coming in with not being able to actually build your shelter out there for the younger, less experienced people on the island. Now, when we look at this, we do have Janine saying that the camp's a lot smaller. It's not as great. Henry is noticing that, there's a minority. He's in the minority of 4v5. So he's in trouble. So he's made those connections. I think we've gone through all of that in the camp. The challenge is the next thing that happens, right? So in the challenge, they've got a challenge where there's two members for immunity that needs to hold up a bar, and they have to go into a squat position, which looked really uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
someone that's done a lot of workouts in the past in the gym, normally you do those squat hold positions to build strength, and the lactic acid builds up like crazy in your legs and in your back when you're doing it. I couldn't imagine doing it for as long as they had to do it. And what made this challenge especially difficult was the fact that you had people with different body sizes and shapes having to do it, that had to balance it together. And if one person lost balance up or down or horizontally, it would knock the blocks off, which would mean that they're out of the challenge. And one of the things that I noticed was that Luke and David decided to do it together. Do you think there's a specific reason they chose to sort of do that together across the board?
They're probably a similar height, I guess. Because the biggest problem would be is if the bit is like leaning differently because one person's a lot taller than the other. But one thing I also wasn't sure about was whether each like platform was measured to someone's height, because surely somebody who's smaller would have to squat a lot less than somebody who's very tall. I couldn't tell if anything was done to consider that or not.
Listen, I'm sure they would have done it to height, because there's someone like a Pia in there who's probably the shortest person there, just off the top of my head. And I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have been able to get as high. Like, she would have been full standing to do what David did, for instance, because he's quite tall. But one of the reasons why I brought up the conversation and sort of mentioned David and Lucky doing it together, I feel like they teamed up on purpose to a certain degree as well, because they knew their name were on the chopping block as the two bottom people. So if it is only about one person having to outlast the rest, chances are you're going to try your best to outlast the rest with the person that you know has got the most to lose in there as well. And I feel like that's probably why they teamed up. It could have not been that case, and it may have just so happened to be that those were the two people doing it. But I thought that was quite interesting to note. And
could be
with this one here,
contenders possibly they say that the contenders on the other side are in minority. So the 7 contenders agree to throw the challenge to get rid of Dave or Luke. If Dave and Luke are together, they can't throw the challenge.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. And it does come to the interesting thing here, because obviously we do see the two last pairs go up against each other here, and Janine and Abby is the last pair within the Contenders Tribe, and Luke starts whispering or saying to them quite loudly at this point, because he can't really whisper because they're a bit far away from him, listen, throw the challenge. And I remember watching this the first time and just thinking, what a horrible move, because you're basically telling people in your current tribe that you're not feeling safe. You're going to jump back to that alliance as soon as you get an opportunity. And if they do throw the challenge for you, they now know that you've got real clout on that side, and you've got potentially you're part of a very strong alliance. So I do need to get you out in the near future. So I thought from a gameplay move, that wasn't the best thing from Luke.
But I kind of think it was already obvious that Dave and Luke are on the outs anyway. Like, there's no point trying to hide it. Like, they're at the bottom. So I don't think it's a bigger a deal on Luke's end. But I guess from Janine's perspective, like, not even responding seemed a bit harsh. Like, they've been good friends for the whole game. You could at least be like, I don't feel 100% comfortable, or I'm not going to do that, but just no answer. A bit cold.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the second part I wanted to get into is by Janine and Abby not actually throwing the challenge. Like, listen, I agree with you. Luke probably, he was like, listen, I'm in hiding to nothing here. I've got to throw anything at the wall and see what sticks here to get some result coming my way. And I feel like Abby and Janine not throwing the challenge is not a smart move on their behalf, because they know that they've got two loyal people here on the other tribe. They're in the minority. They're probably going to go home if we lose this tribe. So basically, by them not throwing that challenge, there's no way they would know that Luke and Dave is going to survive that tribal. So they're saying, we're happy to sacrifice one of you. Or maybe at this point, Janine and Abby already knew, like, listen, they've both got an idol. They can play their idol tonight. So this is a great way for them to burn that idol.
Did they know that Dave and Luke had idols?
Well, Janine definitely knows that David's got an idol, but I don't know if Janine knows that Luke's got an idol at this stage. But we don't see this conversation, so it makes Janine and Abby look really bad in this situation, in my mind. But maybe that's one of the reasons why they didn't throw it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. If they knew that both have got an idol, but from at first glance looking at it, it's not a good move by them.
Yeah, like just also from their perspective, like how much can you really trust Simon and Ross to stay with you? Like, you don't want to throw the challenge. You don't 100% know you have the numbers.
Yeah.
And like it seems, from my perspective watching the show, Simon should flip because he's obviously in the bottom. Like his confessional after the merge, after the swap, was like, I was on the bottom before, but now I'm solidly in the 5, so I'm good. It's like, that's not gonna last long, buddy.
No, but you've got to wonder if he's thinking to himself, it's better to be with the devil I know than the devil I don't know at this stage, because, if he does jump over to the contender side of it, does he then become the bottom? Like, I think they've got 11 people left. Does he become number 12 on their side? Where with the champions, if they somehow survive, at least he's number 7. So it is a difficult decision to make at that point. But I do hear what you're saying. I think Simon. Playing it extremely safe at this point, and we're not seeing a lot of him thinking really strategically at this stage of the game at all. I'm not seeing it from my end.
I think the problem is the small snippets we do get of him aren't very interesting thoughts, so it's hard to really tell what he's thinking.
100%. So we go to the champions side because they've lost, obviously, and we see Luke and Dave talk about the fact that, listen, we're going to have to pull a Houdini out of a hat here again. This will be the second time in the game. We're even in a worse position this time because we've only got 2 versus 7, and like me and you've previously said, not many. I don't think there's any other 2-person group that I can think of off the top of my head that have had to go against 7 people to try and outsmart them or stay in the game at this stage of the game. I could be wrong. I might be missing someone somewhere. I just don't remember it personally. And they're in a bad position here, right? Regardless. And Andy now is starting to feel more and more confident. He's like, listen, this is what I came here to do. I want to play. He doesn't have Sean around him. He doesn't have Harry around him. So he feels like he's the guy who can step up and take lead here, because the only other guy, I think, in the tribe there that moved over was Baden. And obviously he feels like Baden is the beta guy, and he's the alpha between the two of them. So he can make this move and he can get people together. And he's got a very interesting strategy because he does want to split the vote, but he tries to do something here that no one has ever done before by saying, we're not going to tell them where the last vote's going to go away. We're going to do it by a coin flip, and that's going to decide where the vote goes. What do you think of that sort of thinking?
It's a good idea to not make Luke or Dave aware what's happening, but the fact that he's like, I will be the one doing the coin flip, it'll be on me to decide. That was probably the part which lost some people, I'm pretty sure. If they all kind of maybe did a random choice to see who got to do the tie vote or the middle vote, it might not have rubbed people the wrong way in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it confused people too much. The more complicated you make a vote. And I can't remember who it was who said it. I think it might have been Nick Wilson who said that, just to get someone to split a vote in itself is extremely difficult and draining when you're out on Survivor, because everybody's paranoid. No one wants someone else to find out there's going to be a split vote, because then they only have to pull X amount of numbers over and they could take over the majority alliance. So that's stressful enough. And by doing the coin flip, that's just an extra level of complexity. It sounds really good. And it's something that you think would play out really well for the TV, which I'm sure Andy thought about because he was trying to get these TV moments across. But, in this case, I think that it didn't help his case. And what we see at this stage, right, is we see David and Luke split up as a pair and start working on different individuals within the Contender Tribe. They pull Baden aside, they pull Sammy aside, and they're having these different chats with different people. Sammy mentions that there's no way that she's going to flip. Baden mentioned, no way I'm going to flip. But Sammy comes across in David's mind as is being a little bit smug about the fact that the contenders are strong, and she pisses David off, for lack of a better word, and he makes her his target.
Which is interesting because the conversation with Baden was basically the same. So it's strange that he had such a reaction to Sammy's comments. Maybe
Yeah.
I just had a better relationship with Baden in general, so they weren't as put off by it. But it just seemed strange watching the episode.
Yeah, it definitely seems strange, and what makes it really strange, and I think we might as well go into it now, is that we've seen absolutely zero of Sammy up until this point. I don't think she had a single confessional, and there must be a record for maybe she had
She's
one. I don't remember.
she had 0 confessional, 7 episodes. I think she's the only person in Survivor history, like any version, to not get any confessionals ever.
To me, that's really, really bad. And unless she did something really, really bad behind the scenes to really piss off the production team here, I don't understand why she didn't at least get a confessional or two. Because she seemed like maybe she was just not playing a game at all, and she was just sitting back too much and taking it easy. But like I mentioned before, Sam actually played in another reality show, The Amazing Race, in Channel 7, and she got second place in that season. So clearly a good. Sorry, spoiler alert for everyone that hasn't watched that season. It's not the current Amazing Race series that is actually playing over in Channel 10, which is more canon, I guess, compared to the previous ones. But she still needed to be someone that I think would have been somewhat good in front of the camera, understood what it's about. So I just never understood why we didn't get to see much of her at all. And immediately seeing David being put off by her this much, I don't know where it's coming from, because we don't understand Sammy as a person in the show at all, and it's just crazy how this turns out. But I think what's more importantly here and what's really interesting is David talking about the fact the reason that they're splitting people off into different directions to talk to them one-on-one is to cause confusion and paranoia within the current alliance, because they even pulled Baden aside more than once, which I thought was very smart, because it makes it look like they're actually getting somewhere with him. And this gets Andy to become very paranoid, and he makes a bit of a mistake here by outing some information in regards to Sean having the idol.
Yeah, he didn't seem to pay attention to who was around him at the time.
In his defense, Daisy was creeping. She was using Luke's moves, and she was creeping behind the shelter. And she heard it from behind the shelter. So I don't think he knew that she was that close. But I think it was a mistake by Andy, big time here. But I think what happened was you saw Luke and David really get in Andy's head, and they really made him panic, because he felt like he wasn't in enough conversations to understand what's going on. He's not used to going to tribal so often. He's clearly intimidated by David and Luke as two really good Survivor players, which he gives credit to them in tribal, saying that they are two good players. And they just get him making a really big mistake here. And this sets Daisy on a bit of a warpath, because she's close with Sean. She goes over to John, and she says to John, like, listen, this was just outed. Basically, Andy's told all of the rest that Sean's got an idol, and Sean told him that in confidence. And I feel like at this point, Daisy and John probably feels like they're on the outer with the rest of that group. And they think, okay, well, if we're in the outer here, maybe we can flip someone else who feels like he's a bit on the outer, or have been in the outer in that group the whole time, and we get Baden over. That still gives us a 3-person majority in any new 5-person alliance that we put together. And we know these two, Luke and David, will go for it because they're desperate at this point. So I feel like if you really break this down, I think, the first time I watched it, I was like, what is Daisy doing? But the second time watching it, I think it's the right move, because I don't think Andy would have kept John, maybe John for his strength, but I don't think Daisy would have been there for long, because Andy identified early in the Contenders that Daisy and Sean's close, and that's his right-hand person.
Yeah. And I think we didn't really see it, but based on interviews, Sam was also part of the Andy Harry contingency. And apparently Sam and Daisy had been feuding a bit as well. So kind of, when it came down to it, Sam probably made a more logical choice than what we would have known based on the show. Because the way the show paints it is like Andy's making a bad move, so let's target Sam to annoy him. But it's like, why wouldn't you target Andy?
Yeah, that's fair. And again, we didn't understand the backstory there. We didn't understand why
Yeah.
they turned on Sam as easily here the first time we watched it. And I haven't seen some of those interviews, so that's interesting. But I did get the feeling that Sam was working with Andy. I definitely did get the feel that they were pretty close to each other or working in tandem to be able to get this vote going off. But it is quite interesting because, we do see them at the end going to tribal, and there's a lot of talk about between David and Luke, should we take our idols and walk in with it like two Gs, like they call it, and just play balls to the wall. They're not going to be able to vote us out, but they feel confident enough with the conversation they've had with John, with Daisy, and with Baden, who, by the way, I feel like Baden made a really good choice here as well by jumping over and actually joining this alliance, because I feel like Baden was someone that wasn't long for the game in his current position in the game as well.
Yeah, it felt like Andy and a few of the others saw Baden as just like a spare vote, but didn't really need him much. So Baden flipping put him in a situation where he's actually like a vote people are caring about, which is important for him to actually get his footing in the game, because he was clearly on the out to start off with.
Yeah, I agree. He's in a bad position because of the fact that he's playing Australian Survivor, which is a physically dominant game, and he's not the most physical guy. So he needs an alliance that will protect him to get to the merge. And when he gets to the merge, he's golden because he's not a physical threat to anyone. And that's what you see a lot of the time in players that aren't physical beasts. That's why Sandra, every time she got to the merge, went all the way because no one saw her as a threat, for winning any individual immunities, and she ended up playing to the end and getting some wins. And I think that Baden is in that same. He's maybe a little bit better. He's maybe a little bit better than Sandra when it comes to actual challenges, because he did do okay in one or two challenges, but he's not the most dominant physical player. So I feel like he needs people to back him when it comes to the early stages in the game. So I think it's a good move. Tribal's interesting. Jono's definitely trying to get a bit out of Luke here, ask him how he feels, and he says, obviously it is what it is. I'm in the bottom here of an alliance of 7, and we're 2 people on our side. But he does mention that there could potentially be some movement that no one's seeing. There might be a little bit of a blind side coming, and Andy, throughout this whole piece, is very confident things will go the way that he believes it's going to go. The questions are pretty much back and forth with no one giving away too much. I did feel like Luke and Dave were pushing more to say, like, listen, anything can happen. But Daisy and John played it really well and not giving anything away, that they were going to move as well. But there is an interesting part where Andy gets up and he goes and talks to John. And this is one of the things that I mentioned previously to Chantal about Australian Survivor. Australian Survivor, when people go and talk and whisper to each other, they put subtitles on there.
Yeah.
Can we get that in the US? Yeah, can we do this in the US?
I think game changers need that really badly.
Yeah. Even Winners at War, like Winners at War, there were whispering going on all over the place. And now people are saying, let's not have whispering in tribals. I love it. I think it brings some extra excitement. I just want to know what's going on. I just want to understand what's being said. But I don't think you prevent people from talking. I think you just make it more clear what is being said, because I feel like in the States, sometimes they want to blindside the audience as well as everybody. Well, basically they want to blindside the audience as to what's going on as well. I want to see what's going on. I like seeing the strategy. I like seeing what's going on. But anyways, it ends up being a nothing conversation, with the vote ultimately being Sammy that is voted out, and she is the next person that goes, and she's had 0 edit like we discussed. When you look at these 2 episodes, who do you think is playing the best game currently across the board? I guess I would say contenders and champions based on the new tribes that we've got. If you had to choose someone in the new contenders and someone in the new champions, who would you say is playing the best game so far?
In the tribe, I didn't go to tribal. The 5 champion for contender 1, whatever that tribe's called. I think Abby is actually pretty good and has good reads on things, even if she can get a bit emotional with some things sometimes. And she's able to develop good relationships with people, which is needed on the show. And then in the trial into tribal council, I think out of Luke or Dave, Luke is probably the better player because he's more grounded. Doesn't make as many silly mistakes as Dave does.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like I think with all the guests, I asked the same question, and Luke has gotten a shout out in every single one of the episodes so far. If I'm looking at new champions at the moment, you got to take your hat off and give credit for the fact that Luke and David got out of an impossible situation and that they're still there. But I'm gonna go the other way and give a shout out to Daisy here because I feel like. Obviously, we're seeing an edit that is showing us Luke as being one of these power players and David being one of these power players. But I do think that Daisy made a power play here herself. I think she saw that the writing was on the wall for her with Andy and that group, and that she was in the outer with them. And she made things happen with John and Baden flipping over as well. Too many times in Survivor do we see a player that can see the writing on the wall, that know that the trajectory of the game is not going to go their way, and they do absolutely nothing about it. Like I said, the first time I watched it, I was more critical of her game. This time, I look at it and I think to myself, she clearly saw that she was in the outside here. I mean, Andy didn't keep information confidential or private, so she knew trust was broken. I think she made the right decision to jump. So I feel like I'll give her a rare shout out in this case. I feel like she's playing a really good game. And then on the new Contenders Tribe, it is hard to say because we haven't seen them go to Tribal. I do think you're pretty onto it with Abby being good. It's really hard to differentiate between Abby and Janine and Pia because they kind of are like a unit at this stage. I guess we're seeing more from Abby, but I do like Janine at this stage a little bit more because of her being a lot more calculated and not as emotional. Not that I'm thinking being emotional is bad, but sometimes out of anger you can make the wrong decision, and not that we've seen this with Abby yet. So I'm kind of splitting hairs, but I feel like those are the two players I would shout out at the moment from my end in regards to this. Well, Eager Turtle, Doug, it's been great to have you on board. Tell us, what do you have coming up? Like, do you have any future videos dropping?
I have a video on Friday, like American time Friday, which I've been working on Yellman and Dreams and the car situation, which should be fun to watch. Posting videos to my Eager Turtle channel, my Eager Tortoise channel. So always random videos popping up every once in a while on there. It's not exactly planned out, but come along and watch for fun, I guess.
That's great. And sell us on what the difference is between your Eager Turtle and your Eager Tortoise channel. What does the other channel do differently from your main channel?
So my Eager Tortoise is more commentary type videos. So that channel can actually be monetized. Versus Eager Turtle, which is more like just compilation videos.
Great. I do like the commentary videos as well. I think they're really good. One of the videos from your channel that I really enjoy, and for those watching, go check it out, is the Jeff Probst. Is it the Jeff Probst one that you do the sash or there's all of his
King
little
of
bits?
Sass.
What do you call King of Sass? That's the one. I love. Brilliant. You know? And you've got what version 4 out already for that one at the moment? There's 4 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Go check it out, guys. Now, on Reality Pop, we're going to continue to be really busy over the next coming weeks as well. We will have the Survivor buffs back with you. I believe it is on Friday, US time. We're going to have the Survivor Global show again. The next episode that you'll see myself being on, I'm going to be joined by Jake, who you guys haven't met yet. He's one of our international Survivor correspondents. And we will be talking the next 2 episodes on the show. So that'll be episode 8 and 9, I believe, that we're doing next. So really excited about that. And there's also Chantel Francis doing the block every day that Big Brother Canada is showing. She is talking about Big Brother Canada on the show as well, and plenty more. There will be some hot takes with Trev and Drew coming out soon, and that should drop on Saturdays in the future in the States as well. So keep an eye out for all of these guys. If you do like the content that we're putting out there, please hit the subscribe button, put a like on the video, leave a comment, tell us what you liked or didn't like about it. We're happy to receive feedback any way, shape, or form. And also remember to press the notification bell so you know when we're going live next. Thanks for joining us today, guys, and have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye.